Thank you, Charlie. These words are definitely divinely inspired. It takes me a couple days and many, many hours to put together these talks, and thank you to Paul for cleaning the house and making dinner and all these things while I was busy at my computer. Looking up what wise people say about the courage of forgiveness. You know, most spiritual leaders have said that without exception, everyone, no matter how strange their behavior is, everyone is looking for unconditional love, to experience unconditional love. Now, these days you can watch the news or read articles in the paper, and often unconditional love is the last thing we're thinking about. Do those people that said that, do that, act that, tweet that, whatever, are they really looking for unconditional love? And the answer is yes, it's true. But when we hear a story about hate or judgment, it sometimes brings up even anger in us. Why are they doing that? But then if we stop, because we're spiritually evolving people, and say, could it be true? Are they looking for unconditional love? Yes. An example of this might be for you, I know it is for many people, unforgiving our parents, not forgiving our parents for the way they raised us. Some people are still holding negative energy about that. And that negative energy is still working in our consciousness if we're still having trouble with the way that we were raised. You know, they were our parents. They should have known better. How could they treat a child the way they treated me? It's really the voice of drama, the drama of a child who is now an adult and still hasn't forgiven their parents. It's time to overcome anger, the need to blame. One of the greatest obstacles on the spiritual path is arrogance. I'm right and you are wrong. It's a double standard if we sit here and believe we're all one and we're all looking for love. How can we blame our parents for the way they were raised? That's usually where they learned how to be parents. The truth is they did the best they could with what they knew and what they had learned. And the negative behaviors we see in other people are the same thing. They're cries for unconditional love. And we don't know the depth of where that lands in their story of how they were raised or how they've been living life. There's a trick about unconditional love, and I didn't really realize it, and I think it's really true. There's a trick that unconditional love must be given before we can experience it. We must give it and then see how that feels. That's how we learn the power of unconditional love. And once we give it, all of a sudden, compassion comes up in us. We have that welling up of compassion. And I think that's important to notice, because we end up having compassion about how judgmental we've been to those around us, to those around the world. After we feel compassion, the next thing that is important to do is to forgive ourselves for having that judgment, to forgive ourselves and everyone else involved. I read an article some time ago about ISIS, that they have never learned to accept love. Never. They have not felt love. Because if they felt love, they would not be able to wantonly kill people. And boy, my heart just went out to them. So I include them in my prayers. I'm sending love to you. I hope you can feel it. I hope you can just touch it. It will change their lives. So if they can feel it, I believe they can learn how to use it and learn to find compassion in the world. Ernest Holmes wrote that we create one big blanket of forgiveness and fill it full of love. That's one of the greatest things we can do. That's on his 10 Steps booklet to how to live a better life. We've been using the book True Refuge this month by Tara Brach, and she writes that out of all our emotions, Anger is essential to our toolkit of how we live life. I wouldn't have expected that, but there it is. And she said, because we need to know that when we're feeling anger, are we being hurt? Are people violating us? Are they violating our boundaries? Is something really unfair? But at the same time, we don't have to live with ongoing anger. When anger becomes a habit, our bodies really suffer from it. This anger just lies in the background, ready to just ignite when somebody says something we don't like or does something we don't like. And it's really bad for our health. Anger is really bad for our health. And if you read Louise Hay, it's really bad for our livers. That was an interesting thing to keep. But it's also, anger is what keeps us going to war in the world. In the mid-1800s, mid to late 1800s, there was a really amazing group of intelligent people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Thoreau, and many, many others. And they started a new way of thinking about spirituality, because spirituality at that time was fairly fundamental. You're a sinner, and if you don't do X, Y, Z, you'll go to hell. They started thinking out of the box about that. And they became known as the Transcendentalists. They shifted the whole idea of spirituality. And it all centered around personal responsibility. And if you read Emerson's essays, oh my gosh, they're just fascinating how at that time they were thinking so far out of the box on individual responsibility. It was so different, it received the name New Thought. It was a new thought about religion and spirituality. The core belief of Transcendentalism is that people are inherently good and they do their best when they're independent and self-reliant. That's one of Emerson's essays, self-reliant. They also believe that each of us are the outlet for the love of God because we're all one. It's just one unity. And eventually these transcendental beliefs branched off and formed different groups like Unity here in Redding, Unity Worldwide Ministries, Christian Science, Divine Science, and Religious Science, which is our form of spirituality. And it's taught by Ernest Holmes, who wrote the book, The Science of Mind. It is what we teach here as personal responsibility. With personal responsibility, we realize we're always at choice. We can train our mind to catch that anger when it starts to flare up. We can train our mind to catch that. And we don't want it to be habit energy. We want to learn when to catch it and reverse the direction of anger, because we want to maintain our sanity. Does everybody feel that way? How do I maintain my sanity and goodness in this world when so much of it is telling me it's all bad? We catch our anger and we change it. You know, one of the methods of catching anger is mindfulness. And in your program today was a paper on our spiritual principles and our practices. And one of the practices, affirmative prayer, mindfulness. One of the principles is number 5, mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention in the present moment, objectively observing the behavior, attitudes, and the beliefs of ourselves and others. Just paying attention, being in the present moment, paying attention. A few minutes of mindfulness will change everything in your body. Every cell will be so grateful that you've taken time to just calm down and be in the present moment and not let people excite you or overwhelm you. You know, this is really good when you're in line at Costco, just observing reality around you, being fully present, feeling the love of God. It's really good if you're in a doctor's office waiting. I know sometimes doctor's offices can be a waiting game for a lot of time to sit. And instead of being angry at the doctor or the staff, you can just be mindful of who's there and what they're going through, because they're in a doctor's office. You're there for some healing or some advice. Or if you're walking in nature, I love to observe nature in a mindful way. How are the leaves blowing today? What are the bees up to? What are the birds doing? It's just a wonderful way to play with nature. There's a lot of research out there about training our brain to be more mindful, and it shows that we have less stress, less anxiety, less judgment, oh, that's a good one, and less depression, and overall a better sense about our body, being mindful. The aim of mindfulness is not to just be quiet, it's to be present. Pay attention to the present moment without judgment. And if a judgment rolls in, you just let it roll back on out. Just let it go. Another method of deactivating anger is forgiveness, and that is a spiritual practice also. So on your little page here, it's number 8 on principles forgiveness. Forgiveness is the active practice of compassion, the process of releasing perceived hurts, judgments, or grievances, which allows us to see the presence of spirit in everyone. That's what forgiveness is, seeing the presence of God in everyone. In her book, You Can Heal Your Life, Louise Hay wrote about her childhood and the power of forgiveness in her life. She had a very difficult life, held in adulthood a lot of anger and resentment about abuse from her parents, which was mental, physical, and sexual. She ran away from home at age 15, and she got a job as a waitress, and she was so insecure. Any man that came along that was interested in her abused her, used her, because she was starved for love. She ended up pregnant at age 16, and she had the baby and put it up for adoption. So she moved to New York, the big city. There's got to be opportunity for her there. She became a high fashion model, and she didn't even know she was pretty, but she did extremely well there. And at one chance, just by chance, she walked into a church of religious science, and she was just awestruck by their beliefs. And she got the message that it was time to pay attention to her life and the anger and the anger she was holding against her parents. So she started reading everything she could, and I know that that's how I came in. I was like, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. I want to know all the answers. And after a few years, she became a licensed practitioner. She wanted to get into ministerial training immediately, but it's not always offered. So she took time out to become a transcendental meditator, and she even went to the Maharishi's International University in Iowa to learn to do that. Then she went back to New York to take ministerial training. All during this time, she started observing the connection between mind, body, and spirit, the connection between our way of thinking and how healthy our body is. She started making connections, writing this little book. And just at that time, she was diagnosed with vaginal cancer. Well, that was a big one to take into account when you're becoming a minister. She reflected on the pain of her childhood and her resentment of being raped at age 5. So now she was understanding metaphysics, the body-mind connection, and she realized how important it was to let go of resentment and the blame she held all these years for her parents. But she decided to go even farther than that. She went behind her experience and put together scraps of information about her parents' childhood and how they were raised. And then compassion really welled up when she saw how miserable a childhood they had. So she started seeing this bigger picture and learning that now it's time to love yourself and let all of that go. So she did a lot of prayer, meditation, she did good nutrition, and with all this letting go of anger, resentment, in 6 months, the doctors could not find any cancer in her body. So she's a real believer, a real believer. So she finally published her book, Heal Your Body, and it quickly became very popular and opened up a lot of speaking engagements in the LA area, the hotbed of New Thought at the time. She built quite a clientele and was able to buy a lovely home. And then, at age 90, her mom, almost blind and deaf, fell down and broke her back. And she couldn't move, she couldn't do anything. So Louise took her in. She said, "It's time to clean up the old garbage between us." So the child that was not protected is now protecting the mom. Very sweet. And by the time her mom died, they were the best of friends. They were totally free of the past. And it all began with this one little book on healing. And she turned that into Hay House, a huge publishing company we know today. So during childhood, we learn love from our parents, but sometimes it's important to look behind that and see how our parents were raised. Do they even know how to give love? But sometimes as adults, we start to recreate the emotions of our childhood, attracting people that aren't right for us, treating children less than. We start to recreate what we knew as children. And so whatever is happening in your life today, we're all looking for unconditional love. We're looking to release the past that is not serving us any longer, but is alive as energy in your body. It's still impacting you. You know, the world is changing so fast. It seems like unconditional love is a real rare thing. But we can find it within ourselves and give it so that we can feel what it feels like to receive it. Some time ago, I think I shared with my brother that I grew up feeling that he was the most loved and adored child in our family, of which we were the two children. And I felt a sadness most of the time growing up. Now, I had to go to Catholic school, and he got to go to public school. Ticked me off. Every year before school started, he got all these new clothes, and I had to wear uniforms. You know, for a teenager or a child, that's irritating. He seemed to get this and that, and then when my dad died, Mother poured more love on him because he didn't have a father, and when he was 16, she bought him a motorcycle so he could feel like a man, and I went, "What is that?" You could see how I was like, I don't know about this. But years later, before she passed, she gathered up all the family photos, and she made 2 albums, one for my brother Mike and one for me. When I look through those albums, every picture of Mike had me in it, and every picture of me had him in it. See, it's still there. And it was like, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I know that? Because I was so darn judgmental. It's funny how we carry these false perceptions around with us. So think about that this afternoon. What false perceptions might I be carrying around that still cause sadness? Well, for me, it's, doggone it, Mary, you were so darn judgmental. Don't do that anymore. And I love my brother. We talk every Sunday. And he still lives in the family home in Ohio. So any predicament that we're finding ourselves in, or any misguided behaviors that we see in other people, obviously, are all cries for love, all cries for unconditional love. In her book, Tara Brach has a process to help us do that, and it's called RAIN, R-A-I-N. It begins with bringing to mind a situation that made you angry. Feel yourself in it. Just close your eyes and feel yourself in it. Think about the words that were spoken, the energy that was surrounding that, and why you were so angry. That anger is still alive in your body somewhere. But if we can say to ourselves, you know, just let it be. Just let it be. Pause, breathe, just let it be. It's the past. It's nothing that can hurt you today. And then investigate. Why does this still want my attention? Why is this still coming up, wanting my attention? Is it because I don't trust myself? I don't believe in myself? I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to handle life? What is it that still brings this up? Do I want to suffer anymore? Can I accept that was just the way it was? Breathe and let it be. And then we invite the natural awareness of God in our lives into that situation and feel the immense vastness of the journey of our soul through eternity. This one little experience in our life, good grief, we've got an eternity to live. Let's let go. Let's breathe in the love of God. And then put our hands on our heart and say, I love you. I love you. So in closing, here are some words from Louise Hay. In the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole and complete. I'm always divinely protected and guided. It's safe for me to look within myself. It's safe for me to look into the past. It's safe for me to enlarge my viewpoint of life. I'm far more than my personality, past, present, or future, so I choose to rise above my personality and my problems and recognize the magnificence of my being and all beings. I'm totally willing to learn to love myself and offer love to all. All is well in my world, and so it is.